The night of April 20, 1945. Berlin is no longer a capital of light, but a massive crematorium under a rain of artillery from the Soviet Red Army. Amidst explosions that shake the earth and flashes of fire reddening the sky, a discordant sound rises from the direction of Anhalter Bahnhof station, a long, solitary, and haunting train whistle. It is Adolf Hitler's 56th birthday, but instead of grand military parades, the Third Reich is performing a final farewell ritual in the darkness. An armored train quietly sets into motion, its steam mingling with thick fog and pitch-blackened smoke, weaving through twisted tracks to leave the dying city. But this is not a relief train carrying the last panzer divisions to the rescue, nor is it a humanitarian train taking the elderly and children to safety. The train cars are heavy, groaning under the weight of a far more terrifying cargo. It is carrying the soul of Nazi Germany. Inside reinforced steel vaults are thousands of pure gold bars from the Reichsbank central bank, the fruit of years of plundering across Europe, and tons of top-secret files containing lists of sleeper agents, formulas for weapons of mass destruction, and clandestine agreements that could collapse any government after the war. As the train disappears into the darkness of the suburbs, history seems to hold its breath. That was the last time it was seen. That secret-coded train never reached its intended destination in the Alps or the underground bunkers in Bavaria. It vanished like a ghost, taking with it a fortune worth billions of dollars and secrets capable of changing the face of the modern world. Decades have passed, but the question remains, lingering like the fog of that Berlin night: where did that treasure go? Does it lie deep at the bottom of a cold lake, or was it used to buy new lives for war criminals across the ocean? Welcome to the journey to find the answer for the last train from Berlin, a historical ghost that still haunts us to this day. By April 1945, the economy of the Third Reich was no longer a great war machine but merely a rotting mummy. As Marshal Zhukov's tank columns were only a few miles from the outskirts of Berlin, Nazi pride was replaced by utter panic. However, behind the 3-meter-thick walls of the Reichsbank, the German central bank at Hofvogtieplatz Square, another war, silent and suffocating, was taking place. It was a war to disperse what remained of a disintegrating empire. Inside the gold vaults of the Reichsbank, the air was thick with the smell of sweat, dust, and fear. Dim oil lamps cast light on towering stacks of gold bars, gleaming mockingly amidst the chaos. This was not just national gold reserves. It was a horrifying collection: gold bars melted down from jewelry, watches, and even the gold teeth of millions of victims in concentration camps. Every gold bar here carried the coldness of death and ultimate brutality. Bank employees, with trembling hands, were frantically crating bags of diamonds, stacks of Swiss currency, US dollars, and counterfeit British pounds produced in Operation Bernhard. They worked to the roar of Soviet artillery pounding down on the vault ceiling, knowing that every passing minute was an exit door slamming shut. All this dispersal activity fell under a dark plan codenamed Operation Werewolf. According to the deranged vision of Heinrich Himmler and close direction from Martin Bormann, this gold was not allowed to fall into Allied hands. It was the seed for a revenge. The Werewolf plan intended to establish underground resistance networks, nurturing those loyal to the Nazi ideology to wait for a day of resurgence in the future. Gold was the lifeblood of that network. Without this wealth, the empire would die completely, but if it were kept, the specter of the swastika would haunt the world forever. Standing in the eye of this chaotic storm was Walther Funk, the president of the Reichsbank, a short man with a face constantly drenched in sweat. Funk was caught between two pincers: on one side, the brutal truth of the battlefield reality, on the other, the insane orders emanating from the Führer bunker. Hitler, in his final delirium, ordered Funk to hold his position and protect the treasury at all costs. But Martin Bormann, the demon behind the throne, was sending secret letters demanding the immediate transfer of all assets to the south, to the Alpine fortress in Bavaria. These conflicting orders created a tragicomic scene, while ministers argued over the phone, outside, SS officers began arbitrarily commandeering the last trucks to transport wooden crates filled with gold bars. According to surviving secret reports, the manifest of goods placed on the final train was an unimaginable figure to anyone. It was estimated to be over 100 tons of gold bars, hundreds of bags of unsorted gemstones, and an amount of foreign currency equivalent to billions of dollars today. But the most terrifying was not the money, but the steel trunks containing special personnel files, the identities of those who had betrayed the Allies, and secret agreements with major industrial corporations worldwide. On that fateful night, when the final evacuation order was issued, the Reichsbank gold vault looked like an empty graveyard. Rusted trolleys were left behind, and files were scattered on the floor full of muddy boot prints. Walther Funk watched the last crates being sealed with the stamp of the German eagle, knowing he was sending a part of himself into the darkness of history. The transport convoy headed toward Anhalter Bahnhof station, where the armored train waited under a rain of fire. This was not just a simple transport of assets, it was the beginning of a dark legend about Hitler's treasure and escape journey where greed, betrayal, and the darkness of Nazism would blend together, creating one of the greatest mysteries of the 20th century. The train set off, carrying the breath of Berlin and the secrets the Third Reich hoped would never be illuminated by light. As the armored train with the secure code left the Anhalter Bahnhof platform, it was not just rolling on iron and steel tracks, but heading straight into a black hole of history. The context at the time was a post-apocalyptic nightmare. The railway system of the Third Reich, once a pride of precision and discipline, was now merely a fragmented network, plowed by thousands of tons of bombs from Allied air forces. Bridges were snapped in half, stations were mere skeletons of charred iron, and gaping bomb craters waited to swallow any locomotive daring enough to pass. Amidst that devastating scene, the ghost train still trudged southward, under the strict escort of a suicidal SS unit, men who had sworn to commit suicide rather than let the cargo on board fall into enemy hands. But if gold was what dazzled people, the sealed steel trunks in the first-class car were what made the great powers tremble. This was the dark files, the brain of a dying empire. Inside the cold steel casings were lists of hibernating sleeper agents in New York, London, and Moscow, ready to activate assassination and sabotage campaigns even after the war ended. More terrifying than anything were the files on Wunderwaffe, the miracle weapons. These were detailed blueprints for supersonic jet engines, formulas for building the Bell flying disc, Die Glock, and early research on nuclear fission that the Germans had advanced a decade ahead of the world. Beyond that, the blood-stained pages of biomedical experiments on humans at Auschwitz and Dachau were also there. Data on the limits of human endurance, biological viruses, and genetic technology that later, both the US and the Soviet Union would crave to possess to serve the power race in the Cold War. These files were heavier than gold, for they held the keys to dominating the future world. Imagine the atmosphere inside those cramped train cars through the account of Hans Meyer, a rare surviving railway operator. Hans remembered the pungent smell of engine oil mixed with the scent of gunpowder and a suffocating tension. No one said a word to anyone, Hans recounted with a trembling voice in a later interrogation. SS guys stood guard at every entrance, hands always on the triggers of their MP40s. Their eyes were blood red from lack of sleep and madness. Every time the roar of planes was heard overhead, the train would jerk to a stop, huddling in shelters or dense forests. We moved like rats in the dark, knowing we carried an entire empire on our shoulders, but simultaneously feeling like we were sitting in a massive coffin. The only light on the train was the flickering oil lamps, casting shadows of the steel trunks onto the car walls, creating grotesque shapes like ghosts dancing to the rhythmic clatter of the wheels. The tension reached its peak on the third night of the journey. As the train slipped through the dense border region of the Bavarian forest, amidst a thick fog that obscured all vision, an abrupt order was given. The train stopped at a nameless siding, a long-abandoned stop tucked between steep cliffs and pitch-black pine forests. Suddenly, all the lights on the train went out. A terrifying silence enveloped the scene for a few seconds before being broken by frantic shouts in German and the sound of heavy truck chains grinding on the gravel road from the edge of the forest. A fateful turning point occurred right at this sighting. Military Opel Blitz trucks, tightly covered with tarps, were waiting in the dark. Instead of continuing the journey together, a group of high-ranking SS officers appeared with red-stamped secret orders. They began to separate the soul from the body of the train. While the heavy gold crates remained in the armored cars to continue as a decoy toward the Austrian border, the trunks containing the dark files' invaluable intellectual property were urgently transferred to the trucks to be dispersed along a secret mountain path through the Alps. Gunshots suddenly rang out from the distance. Perhaps a local resistance patrol or an Allied scout unit had caught wind of something. The brief but fierce encounter in the darkness turned the remote platform into a bloody battlefield. Amidst stray bullets and gun smoke, the truck convoy carrying the files roared off into the deep woods, leaving the gold train with bodies scattered across the tracks. From that moment, the link between the gold and Hitler's secrets was officially severed. The gold went one way, the files went another, creating the two greatest manhunts in history for which, to this day, the final pieces have never been put back in place. The train continued its journey in solitude, carrying the gold crates that were now merely sacrificial pawns for a much larger escape plan unfolding in the shadows of the Bavarian mountains. As the night shrouded the final efforts of the Nazis to disperse their assets in the mountainous forests of Bavaria, another battle, equally fierce, erupted in the shadows. This was not a war of armored divisions or blazing dogfights, but a game of ghosts between the world's leading intelligence agencies. The setting at this time was an emerging new geopolitical chessboard, the OSS, American Office of Strategic Services, the predecessor of the CIA, and the NKVD, Soviet Ministry of Internal Affairs, were racing feverishly to lay hands on the final train. For them, capturing fascist generals was only a secondary mission. The real prize lay in the steel trunks containing technical files and gold bars. The Americans understood that whoever seized the scientific and financial secrets on that train would hold the scepter of world domination in the second half of the 20th century. Why did Washington crave this train so much? The answer lay in the foresight of intelligence minds like Allen Dulles. They were not just hunting for gold to offset war costs, but they were hunting for brainpower and networks. A list of sleeper agents in Moscow or a blueprint for a jet engine was more valuable than 10 infantry divisions. Conversely, the Soviet side, with its Red Orchestra intelligence network, was also in close pursuit. Stalin's goal was to seize the entire treasure to rebuild a devastated Russia after the war and to prevent the United States from monopolizing hypersonic weapon technology. These two giants were clashing on German territory, and the ghost train was the eye of the storm. However, the SS leadership did not let themselves be captured easily. To deal with the intense pursuit, they launched a masterstroke of psychological warfare, the fake dossiers. During their flight, SS commando teams intentionally left behind wooden crates that appeared important at abandoned train stations or administrative offices. Inside were sophisticatedly forged documents containing phantom agent lists or blueprints for non-existent weapons. These fake dossiers were thrown back as decoys, causing Allied intelligence units to spend weeks verifying them, creating precious time gaps for the real document crates to move deeper into the mountains or across borders. Amidst that chaos, betrayal began to sprout from within the ranks of those closest to Hitler. High-ranking officials, who once shouted slogans of loyalty unto death, were now quietly using gold and dossiers as boarding passes for their own survival. A repulsive bargaining took place in the shadows of Alpine villas. Nazi rats began contacting OSS agents, offering to exchange dossiers on atomic technology or the locations of gold bunkers for a new identity, a fake passport, and a safe passage to South America via the Ratlins. The gold of the Third Reich was no longer a national asset, it had become a personal bargaining chip to buy freedom from the victors. The most concrete trace of this treasure was discovered by chance at the Merkur salt mine in Thuringia. When the U.S. Army entered, They were astonished by the sight inside caves hundreds of meters deep. Thousands of bags containing gold bars, paper currency, and countless priceless works of art from the Louvre Museum were piled up. General Eisenhower personally came to inspect, and the world thought the mystery had been solved. But the reality was a bitter deception. After inventorying and cross-referencing with Reichsbank ledgers, financial experts were stunned to realize, this was only a small portion. The purest gold bars, the largest diamonds, and especially the entire dark dossiers regarding new weapons were not present at Mercur's. What had happened? The most important items had been separated from the Mercur's treasure as early as the night of the stopover at a sighting in the Bavarian forest. What the Allies found was only the tip of the iceberg, an arrangement to appease the greed of the hunters. While the world was preoccupied with the pile of gold in the salt mine, the real shipment, the soul and core secrets of Nazi Germany, had vanished into the mist, protected by traitors and intelligence ghosts preparing for a new chapter of history, a chapter where the truth was buried under secret agreements and fake names in Argentina or Brazil. The hunt had not ended, it had only just shifted into a more sophisticated and cruel form. After the gunshots of World War II faded over the ruins of Berlin, a haunting new chapter began, the chapter of treasure hunters and historical ghosts. For decades, the question regarding the fate of the final train has become an unceasing obsession, leading explorers, divers, and even intelligence agencies into desperate searches across the harshest terrains of Europe. The first and most popular theory brings us to the cold waters of Lake Toplitz, located deep in the Austrian Alps. This place, dubbed Hitler's Vault, has long been associated with rumors of steel trunks containing gold bars and secret dossiers thrown to the bottom of the lake as SS troops fled. Diving efforts throughout the 1950s and 1960s revealed a horrifying truth: Lake Toplitz was not just a hiding place, but a deadly trap. Divers found millions of counterfeit British pounds from Operation Bernhard, but alongside them were decayed trees and thick silt that made recovery impossible. The mysterious deaths of several divers during the search further thickened the veil of legend. Were the gold and dossiers truly lying at the bottom of the deep lake, or was Toplitz just another decoy graveyard set up to distract the world from a greater truth? While divers were preoccupied with the frozen lakes, a second theory, more realistic and terrifying, began to emerge: the Ratlins. Independent investigators and Nazi hunters like Simon Wiesenthal believed that the gold missing from the Berlin train was never buried under earth and stone. Instead, it was sophisticatedly laundered through a network of neutral banks in Switzerland and corrupt religious organizations to fund the great escape of war criminals. Gold bars were recast, and gemstones were sold cheaply on the black market to purchase fake passports and first-class ship tickets to Argentina, Brazil, or Chile. In South America, Little Germany communities sprouted in the heart of the jungle, nurtured by the very assets that the final train had carried away. That treasure was not in a tomb, it was in secret bank accounts, sustaining men like Adolf Eichmann or Joseph Manschel, helping them build new lives while the world was still preoccupied searching for decaying wooden crates. Only recently, as some CIA and MI6 archives were declassified after long periods of being sealed, have new pieces of the final train puzzle begun to be revealed. These documents show a harsh truth: the Allies likely knew more than they admitted. Some records from the 1950s imply that US intelligence units had actually accessed a portion of the train at the Austro-German border shortly after the war ended. However, instead of making the treasure public, a clandestine agreement in the shadows of the Cold War was implemented. This was precisely the shadow of the Cold War. As the world split into two poles, the dossiers on V-2 rocket technology and atomic research on the Berlin train became strategic assets that could not be priced. The victorious powers realized that, revealing the truth about the train meant admitting they were cooperating with the criminal minds of the Nazis to build their own weapon arsenals. The truth about Hitler's gold and the secret files was buried not because people could not find them, but because they had become a part of the new power apparatus. The gold bars were transformed into black budgets for intelligence operations, while the dark dossiers became the foundation for the space race and modern military technology. The journey to find the final train from Berlin ultimately does not lead us to a glittering physical treasure, but to a bitter truth about political morality. The secret vaults or the ghosts in South America are perhaps just covers for a reality that, the treasure of the Third Reich has melted into the lifeblood of the modern world, existing in the technologies we use and the secrets that the great powers are still trying to protect to this very day. That train never stopped, it only changed shape to continue its journey in the shadows of history. As the mist of history slowly closes over the ruined railway tracks of Berlin, we realize that the fate of the final train perhaps never truly ended at any specific station. After more than 8 decades, it has moved beyond the boundaries of physical gold bars or decaying files to become a dark symbol, a symbol of the ultimate brutality and bottomless ambition of an empire that once wanted to swallow the entire world. That train carried not just assets, but the entire rot of humanity, distilled into precious metals and deadly ciphers. In the world of Nazi Noir, the light of justice is sometimes not strong enough to shine into the depths of the shadow's dens. There are truths that were destined to remain forever in the ground, at the bottom of frozen lakes, or shredded in the paper shredders of Cold War intelligence agencies. Nazi gold is no longer a treasure to be sought, but it has become a curse in the stories told, a bone-chilling reminder of how far humans can go to protect power and cowardly survival. Those gold bars may have been melted down to cast new coins, those dossiers may have become the foundation for modern weapons of destruction, but the cold from that April 1945 night train still remains. It haunts the unsolved pages of history and challenges the curiosity of mankind. We may never touch the steel trunks on that armored train car, but by searching, we keep the truth from being distorted by time. History never disappears, it only quietly hides in the corners of time, waiting for those patient and courageous enough to excavate it. Thank you for accompanying us on the journey to decode the ghosts of the past. This is the Noir Archive, and further secrets are still waiting to be unfolded. Goodbye and see you again.